ShelterBox mission is that we want to see no family without shelter. And I know that's a huge ambition, but how we go about doing that is we look at who are the most vulnerable in society in the different countries that we respond to, and those are countries that have either had a natural disaster or are in conflict at the moment. And how we approach it is we go into these countries, we meet the people who've been affected by these disasters, and we say, all right, what can we offer that's going to enable these people to get shelter in this emergency phase and then start to recover their lives so they can get back working towards what they had before, or ideally something even better.
There are lots of occasions where people will continue to stay in houses that the government has deemed unfit for occupancy, that could come down, sort of thing. It's been cracked too badly, damaged too badly from the earthquake, but they choose to stay in them anyway. They're not really supposed to, but this is their homes. They don't want to leave their homes, or they haven't received any aid, and so they feel like they have no choice. And that's another reason why ShelterBox is here, to say, okay, here now you have the option, you have the choice. You can get out of the house that is very unsafe to stay in.
So we're here in Ecuador, the sun's very intense, there's a very heavy rainy season, there's mosquitoes everywhere, and these people were just sleeping outside because either their houses were destroyed or they were terrified of another quake, so they weren't willing to sleep in their house. When we first came in after the earthquake, what we found was we had the materials, we had the skill base, however we didn't have that local knowledge. How do you get to the people who need it most? How do you link in with the community leaders to make sure you're identifying the individual families who need that support, and then how do you scale that so you're helping 2,500 families at one time? And the right answer for us here was Progad. So we met these guys, they were on message with us, they really wanted to help. They hadn't done much emergency relief before, they had done a lot of development projects with communities, and so that's our in. You know, you've got people on the ground with local knowledge, a team can fly in, within a day they're in the area that's been affected, they're talking to the right people. So with us supporting them, they could go into these communities, use all their local knowledge, their links to the municipal government, the community leaders, to identify exactly who in each of those villages needed our support, and then we'd go in together, do the training, provide the aid, and enable those people to build their own shelter. And it was through this local agency that we were able to do this. The ShelterKit is a standardized item, basically. There's some variation in it, but the reason we use that is, and this thing's been designed so you can get it all over the world into any country without any restrictions in terms of where it was made, what kind of materials it has in it. So you've got to come up with this product that you can get anywhere, anytime, without getting stuck at customs for all these reasons. The other great thing about it, like I said, other agencies use it as well, and so if we're working in one village, the Red Cross is working in the next village, you're not setting up one village with $500 worth of aid per family and the other village with $50, which is what a ShelterKit is. So you can work with other agencies really, really easily. So what ShelterBox uses is 2 tarpaulins, 6 by 4 meters, incredibly strong. They've got these black reinforced strips on them, which is the area that you nail through. Different types of nails, so some with little rubber umbrellas on them. Put that on the roof, use the black strip, that's completely waterproof. Put the rest around the walls, and there's other tricks like strips of bamboo, bottle caps, put the nails into those, that thing's never going to rip off. There's also wire in there, quite useful for tying together joints or even creating a washing line, whatever they need that for, and also a 30-meter rope, which is quite a thick rope but can actually be sort of separated into 3 cords, so you can end up with 90 meters of cord. Hammer, like I said, 3 types of nails, a saw, you've got a hoe, wire cutters, but these are pretty strong wire cutters, so you can also cut other types of metal like zinc roofing or something like that if you're able to salvage it from the home that was destroyed. And what we found is actually by providing these materials, A, they can continue their subsistence farming if that's something they already do, but also you hear of cases of people actually being able to pick up work elsewhere because they've got tools to go to work with, a bit of cash in hand, sort of carpentry somewhere or building support, and that's fantastic. If you're then supporting someone to actually start earning money that they can then use for their family, that's all part of the recovery process as well. So that's like a real range. If someone's lost everything, that is really useful to them. However, there's other situations like here in Ecuador, people's homes were damaged or destroyed, but the materials were still there. They were still living at those sites. And what they wanted to do was rebuild their lives at their homes and go forward from that point. And that's where the ShelterKit comes in. And with the training that we did on this deployment as well, where we actually show people how to use these materials most effectively, then we added some bamboo and some concrete. They've built some fantastic shelters for themselves, some things that were almost equivalent of their very basic homes. And then hopefully the government's going to support them to rebuild, a full concrete home for their family. So it's like this stage process. And the tools and the kit and the training just mean they can keep going along that path towards recovery.
One of the benefits of sending the ShelterKit as opposed to the ShelterBox is that the ShelterKit has its purpose based solely on shelter. And so it's a set of tools for making, as opposed to a tent ready to go, it's a set of tools for making their own shelter, working with bamboo, working with cement, so that people can have that self-respect of building their own places and fixing themselves up and getting their lives back together again. And that was quickly understood by the ShelterBox organization, that this is a way that rather than just depositing all sorts of stuff for people who might never ever use it, it was getting right to the core of the issue and making sure that the true needs are met, and that people can feel that self-respect of taking care of themselves rather than just receiving handouts. This is one of those cases where there was a house here, there was a house over there, side by each, down to the ground from the earthquake. It's about 3 months now, a little bit better than 3 months past the time of the earthquake. And the government has come in and cleaned everything out. And what can happen now is the individuals here have need for shelter, warmth, protection from the elements. They can use the shelter kits to make their own, thanks to the help of ShelterBox. The tricky part is you can have some disparity amongst the locals in that in a situation like this, you've got houses that remain standing and then houses that came to the ground. And so it's very important to understand who needs the help, when they need the help, which help they need, how much of that help do they need. And so ShelterBox works very diligently to get the answers to all of those questions so that they can act appropriately and swiftly to get the help to those who truly need it. Hola. Muy bonito. Muchas gracias. It's easy to see in setting up a distribution like this, it's actually more complicated than one might think. It's not just a simple thing to show up into a country and start handing out equipment and emergency supplies that could be worth anywhere from tens to hundreds to thousands of dollars. Even where the distribution takes place is vital. You look around this whole area here, they've chosen a particular yard with high walls so people can't climb over top and sneak in. Only one entrance in, one entrance out, so that close attention is paid to who's coming, who's going, what they're getting. And for example, once someone gets their kit, they must leave the compound and they're not allowed to return. And in this way, it's not meant to be cruel or mean. It's meant to protect those who are truly in need, to make sure that they get the kit that was sent here for them. It has to be done in an organized fashion. The danger, for example, could be not only something dark, as in the kits are stolen and then sold somewhere else for profit or taken somewhere far from the need. People hoarding kits, maybe getting 2 or 3 because they loop around. 3 people in one family each getting a kit when it should be 1 kit per family. Things like this can happen, and so organization around the distribution of these kits is vital in terms of keeping a lid on it and making sure the right people get the kits that they have coming to them. So ShelterBox has a system that has triple redundancy on getting someone's name and identification and signature to get them to the point where they can actually step inside, take their kit, and go back to their family and start to affect the shelter. Even the levels of literacy matter in a situation like this. There are individuals who can't read, can't write, and so there are aids there to help them understand what the papers say. There is an ink pad so that they can actually use their thumb and do a thumbprint to sign because they can't sign their own name. And then there's the cultural barriers. Many people are not accustomed to signing forms of any type. So to hand them a 2-page form and photocopies of their birth certificate, if they have one, and it takes a lot of care and consideration and patience to make sure that it all goes down correctly. Again, always so the end result is the people who have the need receive the need. So you can see they even need to take the time to make sure that everybody is instructed on how to use the equipment. No assumptions are made that people will just know exactly what to do. That way, when they get to the other end, at least they've been notified in their own language in ways they can understand so that they can most effectively put up their shelters and create a better life for themselves. So what happens now is ShelterBox, along with the local aides, help the people who need help, the elderly, the women and children, that sort of thing, to bring the kits out to this one spot here, this one door. What happens here, it's now theirs, it's up to them. Often there's people, I helped this older gentleman here bring his out, and so he'll go into this truck, he's got someone helping him, and off they go to back to their homes. Now, why is it important that even this step of the procedure is something that's well thought out? Because what can happen is you give this kind of equipment to somebody, they leave the compound, they go down the road a half a mile, and before you know it, they're hit up by people or mugged, so to speak, and the equipment is taken away from them. So in some cases, it's a high security situation where you want to make sure that the aid makes it all the way to the end of the line for the recipient, for the beneficiary. And in other cases like here, actually this is in Ecuador, where the security is fine, there's not so much of a danger. Everybody seems very well organized and coordinated. ProGad, the local group that we're working with, is making sure things are safe and taken care of. So here we're all right, but in some cases it can be tricky to make sure that the aid makes it all the way to its final destination without being stolen.
I want to make sure my team is safe. I want to make sure everybody I'm providing aid to doesn't become a target because they've got aid and others don't. And you do that through really careful planning, basically. So you go through it step by step. At every point you think, what do we do if this happens? How do we plan if this happens? And that even applied to us when we were there. What if an earthquake happens? What if another aftershock comes? You know, we're in an active earthquake zone here. So we had our routes of where we'd meet, how we'd get out, how we'd get to the car, that kind of thing. And it's the same planning when we're distributing the aid, making sure that you don't enable a situation to happen by bad planning, basically.
All right, I'm in Manta, Ecuador, where the earthquake did hit, and ShelterBox is in this particular spot because there's a gentleman that is handicapped, disabled, so they're helping to rebuild a shelter. His house was right there, and it collapsed with the earthquake. Some of the buildings around did not collapse, as you can see, but his did, and so ShelterBox has come in, and this is using their ShelterKit to establish essentially a temporary place for him to live with his family. So even though for our sensibilities this doesn't look like much, it looks like really not much more than a tarp storage shed or something like that, but this represents home to a family that has not had one since the earthquake. This provided by ShelterBox, and it's going to keep this family protected. It's gone up very quickly. There are many more homes that are in the same situation like this, or at least many more families who lost their homes, and that's where the ShelterKit and where ShelterBox comes in.
It can be a difficult job at times because you go into some incredibly difficult situations. You know, one day after an earthquake, 3 days after a cyclone, during a flood while it's still happening and following it as it recedes. However, what always comes through for me is people are good, basically. You know, it sounds like a dumb thing to say, but you go into this situation where, you know, a city's been destroyed, 20% of the population's just died, and you'll go in and you'll find local people who just want to help, who just want to assist us to assist these families. And it's something that always hits me pretty hard, actually, is not kind of the scenes that I encounter, but the kindness that comes with that, and this remarkable response from people in unbelievable situations.